Electric Jam Podcast.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to the Electric Jam Podcast. I'm Christopher, and I'm here with Richard, as always. If you don't know who we are, check out our website in the description of this podcast. Electric Jam has guitar reviews, gear testing, tons of info on recording, just about anything you want to know about guitar. Richard, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
A bit frazzled.
A bit frazzled. I know that feeling. That's basically my life. Just frazzled constantly, and then it's the weekend, and you don't get to have any time off. You just kind of do more and more stuff. Yeah.
Sunday is my sacred day. Sunday is the day I'd call it trash day. I eat whatever I want. I'm not doing anything. I'm sleeping in until at least 8 o'clock.
Oh, I don't get those days anymore. I used to get them all the time. Yeah, but me in my 20s and like early 30s, oh my God, every day was a trash day. But now it's Christ. Even when you're ill, that's the worst. Even when you're ill, you still can't rest, because when you get ill, you're ill because your little kid's giving you something. So then you've got to look after them and be ill. And oh man, yeah, it's not fun. But you know, that's just life, isn't it? Life in you.
It's kind of like being on tour and being sick. I mean, like, I already had these shows booked, especially if you get sick like the second day in, and you know you have 2 more weeks to go.
That must happen a lot as well, because it's not exactly a hygienic thing. Like the thing with the microphone and stuff, like, you know, you're literally some guy's spitting all over a microphone, and then you go on after him and do the same.
I always brought my own.
I was going to say, it's a bit like condoms, isn't it? You wouldn't want to use somebody else's.
No, absolutely not. But yeah, I mean, you would get sick, and then it's just mitigating the symptoms with, NyQuil and Dayquil, depending on what time of day it was. But yeah, it was always awful. But you got to do it. You got to power through it. So.
And also the drinking as well, because obviously that lowers your immune system. So a lot of partying and all that kind of stuff, which I imagine goes on the road a little bit, but not as much as people imagine. Not
anywhere near as much as you would think.
I don't think you can. I don't think you can do it like that hardcore. I think the first few you probably would, and then, I mean, I know I would have done, but I think if I was in a touring band, I don't think I'd be alive anymore.
I did it the first time we ever had a long stretch where we had, I don't know, about 8 or 9 shows in a row. I felt awful about halfway through, and I was like, I'm never doing that again. So it became like a ritual almost that the last day of every tour, we would get drunk.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, then when we would go home after that, we'd get a little wasted, and we'd have fun with the other band, whoever we were playing with. And it was always fun if it was someone, kind of bigger in the region, because then you're partying with rock stars, kind of, Yeah, you got to take care of yourself out on the road. Today's episode is all about the golden age of guitar, and this is kind of going to be a short one today, but we wanted to get it in because it's something that Richard and I talk about all of the time for the website, and it's not something that we consciously really think about anymore, but the golden age of guitar, when I say the golden age of guitar, I kind of mean it's the best time to be a guitarist right now. As far as resources go, as far as buying a guitar, I mean, when I started playing, a $200 guitar was firewood.
Literally.
Literally.
I mean, I had a Yamaha from 20 odd years ago, Yamaha acoustic, and it is literal rubbish. It just terrible guitar. It literally sounds horrific. It's just that you change the strings on it, change the action, you get, give some, bit of maintenance, a bit of TLC, and it just, I've never met a guitar that it just sounded bad no matter what you did to it. I'd love to give it to someone like an actual expert, and they wouldn't be able to fix it. It'd still sound terrible. And I think I paid £180 for that guitar. So, it was an absolute pile of rubbish. But now you're basically spoiled for choice with cheap guitars that sound really good.
Yeah, it's totally different now. I would say in the past 5 years or so, it seems like every company now has CNC machines. They have everything routed out in a CAD program. Almost every guitar is exactly the same. You know, they have some sort of consistency, where back in the day, they weren't completely made by hand. I mean, nothing was completely made by hand even back then, but a lot of it was still made by hand. So you would see variations between the same guitar models. Now, I mean, Harley Benton is a great example, because just about every guitar that I've tried from them, it's been pretty much the same, consistent quality.
Yeah, they've kind of got down to a fine art.
Yeah, exactly. They've really nailed it, and they use good components across the board. So,
I think that's the key thing with it. It's hard to do. Get into guitar business is very tricky. There's a lot of moving parts. The production is, I imagine, insanely cost expensive up front if you're, automating most of it. They're not light, so distribution, getting them out's tricky. It's not something you just kind of go, I want to start a guitar company and I'm going to do it. Like, if you're doing handmade stuff, fair enough. Like, you're doing like 1 or 2 orders a month. But if you're doing, tens of thousands of, orders potentially a month, which I imagine Thoman's probably doing something close to that with Harley Benton.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just from our site alone, the amount of like kind of people we have reading the articles that we have about Harley Benton on the site is, way up in the tens of thousands. So, and we're just a small blog, so I can imagine the global kind of click-through rate and the purchasing of their products is enormous. So they have it really down, but they've been doing it for a long time. So they've probably been refining the process for forever. But yeah, I'd love to see the factory and see how they do it, because they are consistent, and I think that's the key. And with them, they've kind of got this really good word of mouth thing going on now, where it's the social proofs kind of all over their site. So you go onto there and you look at any of their guitar models, they have tons of reviews, and from what I've seen, they don't tend to moderate it. So it's sort of like there is some like, it was okay, but one of the frets was a little sharp or something, and it's like, dude, it's a 180 quid guitar. Like, come on. It sounds as good as my Player Series Plus from Fender, but one of the frets was a bit sharp, so I'm knocking 2 stars off, and it's like, oh, come on. But yeah, the reviews are generally really, really good across the board, from like the really cheap ones to their kind of sort of more expensive premium models. So yeah, I got a lot of time for that brand. I do really, really like them.
I played the Harley Benton Fusion 3 model, and that is so close to being a Charvel. It is ridiculous. It is so close to being a Charvel. There's little details that make it feel not as expensive, but it's pretty close. But other than Harley Benton, we also have a brand in the States for Guitar Center, and they're called Mitchell, I believe. I think that's
Mitchell.
This
reminds me of Mitch from
John
Family.
I was thinking of the Joe Don Baker movie from Mystery Science Theater 3000, but yeah, they have these Mitchell guitars, and they're mostly single cuts from what I've seen. Les Paul style, dual humbucker. And I picked one up the last time I was in there. I was like, this thing is great. It's like $300, and it plays amazing. So there's no real excuse anymore to say, well, I really want to get into guitar, but I don't have $2,000 to go out and blow anymore. And it's the same thing with amplification. And I have a video coming up soon. It'll be on our YouTube channel, on my personal YouTube channel. I'm going to make a song out of nothing but free plugins.
Ooh.
Including the guitar stuff. And it's not free trial. I mean, like, just totally free stuff that you can find out there on the internet. And I'm going to do a whole song with it. Drums, bass, guitar, the whole 9 yards. And
Nice.
produce it and put it out there. Because I found all of these, and they're all great.
What's the kind of level with because the drum thing's always, for me, that's kind of like, that's a really hard thing to get right. it's really hard to get right with a really good drummer and a really good studio, to get that kind of really good tight drum sound.
Definitely.
So I have heard some good examples of electronic drums with, but there's a Meshuggah album where they basically used programmed drums. I can't remember which one it was. But
Chaos Sphere.
Yeah. So it can be done, but I'd always say, what are you using for that? Or you just want to save it for the video?
I'll go ahead and say it. I'm using the Steven Slate drums. It's called SSD5. And they just give you one kit. But the amount of options for reverb and room sound that you have, you can go all the way from super dry 80s drums to, like these huge room sounds, like something that you would hear on a Cure album or the Smiths, something with a lot of reverb,
Cool.
And you have all of that control, and it's just the free version. So I can't even imagine what the paid version looks like.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting. And you use Reaper, right, to do this?
I do, yeah, which is also, it's not free. But
it kind of is, isn't it? That's the thing.
It's $60. You can keep using it for as long as you want, but I feel like it's the morally correct thing to do to pay them for it. Yeah, I've had a license for Reaper for about 12 years now, so I don't mind paying them. But yeah, technically, you can download the program and use it for as long as you like. And
just make sure to pay it forward, because,
Yeah, definitely.
to the nice people at
Definitely.
Reaper.
Yeah, if
that's
you enjoy it, pay for it.
Yeah, I think it's, I'd be definitely interested to hear that, because there's so much stuff where, some people might have like a guitar and a computer, and they're kind of like, because it's hard to find like a drummer and a bass player. It just is, and even if you kind of want to sort of demo stuff together, like it's also good. It's good experience as well for sort of practical knowledge of putting together songs, composition, because you can write, you can put together like the bones of a song on a guitar, but when you kind of bring drumming in or the percussive element, it kind of completely changes. What you're doing on the guitar. Because one of the things I like to do is I've got this thing where I just put When the Levee Breaks by Zeppelin. There's an isolated drum track of it. It's like 7 minutes, and it's on. So I just stick that on, and because it's one of the best drum beats of all time, and just stick that on, and then just riff around on it. All different types of stuff, like fast stuff, slow stuff, picking, whatever. And that's kind of like a little practice thing. If I'm kind of not got anything to do or I can't think of anything that I want to play, I'll just stick that on.
Perfect practice speed.
It's great. It's just because it's kind of just it's got that like kind of rock beat to it, so you can kind of get quick over it if you want, or you can slow it down, or I've done some like doom riffs on it and stuff. It just works with everything. It's like the most versatile drum beat ever. Yeah, so there's lots of cool stuff you can do with that, but it changes the way. So you can go in and think, I wonder if I can put that to it, or put this idea to drums, because I'm really bad for counting. Like I just don't do it. I just don't count at all when I'm playing. I just kind of play and go, yeah, because I never think like that. So I've been trying to do that more often, because it kind of forces you to think about like syncopation and stuff, and how everything fits together. But also on top of that, like you say, when you're programming like bass and drums and any extraneous stuff you're putting on like synths and stuff, you have to think, oh shit, what key am I in? What what works with this? Does that work with this? I don't know. So it kind of forces you to be a bit more analytical with your song composition, I think. And I think that's a really good skill to have as a musician anyway, an aspiring musician or any musician, because it kind of makes you, it'll improve your craft effectively, I think.
It really will. It really will. And it's never been easier. And something that you mentioned before we even started, we were talking about how easy it is to learn now. And I remember the very first book I ever got, and it was a Metallica song book. And there was no internet when I first started playing in 1994. There was, but it was very bare bones. There was no way you were going to find... Yeah, you weren't going to find tabs on the internet.
It was just weird collections of people's websites, like like
Right.
like Bob Sampson's website about uploading pictures of his garden gnomes and stuff before brands got hold
Gifts
of
in
it.
the background.
Yeah, just weird stuff.
But yeah, they didn't have anything, so we had to go out and buy books, and the one that I bought was called Metallica, just the riff. And it only had the riffs to every song by Metallica to that point, which was up until the Black Album. So it was really cool.
Could have just
to
ended
get
it there
that
and it would have
book.
been fine.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't have any of Kirk's parts, so I had to figure all of that out by ear. But learning just the riff to every song, I mean, if you break down a Metallica song, it's really just about 6 or 7 different riffs all put together, and then a solo, and then an outro. And that's the way it was in that book. And that taught me a whole lot, but it cost me $20, and I had to go out and buy it, and you don't have to do that anymore.
But I think there's a caveat to that. Because I did something similar. Like my dad played like classical, like Spanish guitar. So they were the only guitar books lying around the house. So I just used to like look at them and kind of mess around with them. And it's YouTube is amazing. Like for learning stuff on guitar, it's phenomenal. The internet as well. It makes everything so much easier, so much more accessible. But I think personally, because I find this now, and it can be completely overwhelming to the point where you get obsessed with stuff that is just irrelevant to what you're actually trying to do. Like you just go down these rabbit holes of just, so stuff gets way too technical, way too quickly, and you're like, oh no, I'm only, I need to know the Mixolydian and all these modes and all this kind of stuff, and it's like without knowing, kind of putting the cart before the horse sort of thing. Whereas, like what you're talking about, like getting a book, like a book of riffs, and just sitting down and systematically going through it, you're kind of forcing a sort of muscle memory thing to go on, because it's like active learning. You're like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do this. I'm not just going to like mong around on my phone watching people play YouTube on guitar. I'm going to sit down with my guitar, no distractions, because the internet doesn't exist, and I don't have a cell phone because it's 1994, and play guitar for a few hours. Whereas now, even if you're sat down with your guitar at a computer or on your phone, and you're trying to sort of learn something, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I don't tend to do this. I will literally just be like, type in something that I kind of half interested in, like, going like the Cage system is like a really good example, right? Somebody who's been playing for a while, they might go, hang on a minute, I want to play up and down the neck. How the hell are they doing that? And then you hear about the Cage system, and then you watch a bazillion videos on the Cage system, and they all kind of explain it in a different way. And you kind of watch and you play along a bit, and then you kind of go away, then you move on to something else. And I just think sometimes, particularly with something like a guitar, you really have to like beat the basics into your brain like so hard, more so than any other thing that I've ever had to learn how to do, because with the dexterity and stuff and the moving and the stuff you got to remember, it's like even the basics are quite difficult with music. And it's like the whole thing with shredders, isn't it? People go like, they learn the guitar, and it's like, I want to play like that. I want to be able to go like, that's how I want to play like super shred fast. And that's all they learn. And they'll just drill like one run down the neck. And they just do it over and over and over and over again. And it's like, great, you can do that now. But what are you going to do with it musically? Like, you can play that one pattern quite fast, and you can play it all over the neck. But, so what?
Right.
Do you know, can I, if I play like a G, C, A, and a D, and a kind of riff, can you play over that? Can you do that over that? No, I don't know. You don't know where the chords are. You don't know where it starts, where the tonic is. There's lots of things like that, and it's, while it is great.
You have a great point.
To have all these resources, and it's amazing, because I spend literally most of my spare time, if I'm eating lunch or something, I'll just be watching something about technique or something, or a review of guitar or something, and then I'll kind of, because I've been playing for ages now, I can kind of I can remember stuff. I'll be okay, I need to remember that, and I'll try it out later. and I'll kind of make a mental note, and then when I've got 5 minutes, I'll sit down, even in the kitchen upstairs, and I'll grab my guitar and be like, oh yeah,
I do that too. Yep.
and I'm like, hey, that's cool. But I think if you're just a complete beginner, it's really it's almost like too much to take in. And there's so much bravado on YouTube channels of the people that do this stuff. Like it's almost like this flexing all the time, like how good they are. I just love like one guy who just be like, without the 5-minute intro of him just, fret wanking his way through, every single fret on the
Right.
guitar. So yeah, I'm a bit further of like, if you're going to learning should be like an active learning process. I don't think something you should be doing casually, like just looking. Do you know what I mean? Because I think
I agree.
You're wasting bandwidth on stuff that isn't necessary to where you are right now. Like if you're an absolute beginner, the best thing you can probably do is like buy a course, like a focused course, because then that becomes active learning because you bought it and you're going to go through it module by module, and you don't move on to the next thing until you've
nailed
got the nail. It was like in school. That's why
Yeah.
they don't teach you A-level chemistry in year 9, because you're not ready.
Right. You don't even know basic biology yet. How are you going to get into chemistry?
So it's kind of
Yeah.
like a double-edged sword in that respect, and it's the same with gear. Like you say, it's amazing, all the like the plugins and the amp sims and all that kind of stuff you have, but it also creates. I'm just speaking from personal experience here, but it almost makes me a bit like I don't even know. I don't even know what I want now, because there's so many options. Whereas if you just got an amp and some pedals, that's it. You kind of just go, okay, well, this is what I've got, so I have to make it work. Whereas if you can have an infinite amount of effects and an infinite amount of pedals and cabinets and amps, you can just switch and change them around. It's very hard to. I find it quite hard to focus in on. Like, this sounds good, but if I do this sounds better, and then this sounds better, and then this sounds better, and if I put that in, you just kind of like it's like too many cooks spoil the broth. It's like too many effects and plugins and amps spoil the creative process. So
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I sold my Helix. I am no longer a Helix owner. And the reason that I sold it is because it gave me option paralysis.
that's it.
All the time.
That's what the word I was looking for. I couldn't really think of a way of saying it. So I spent 2 minutes saying something you did in like 2 seconds.
And if you've read our site, I mentioned that a lot. We've had a lot of products that have so many options built into them that it just becomes way too much. And with the Helix, I was using maybe 4 or 5 different patches. Like I had a really good clean patch, I had kind of a dirty patch, I had a metal one, and I had a lead one. But I wasn't using anything else. And I noticed that wasn't anything that I couldn't attain just by using my pedals and my amp. So I got rid of the Helix. I mean, it was, catching dust on the shelf, because I got tired of getting in there and thinking about, well, I'm going to make this specific tone. And I end up playing with it for like 4 hours and I got nothing done.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't find the right cabinet and the right mic position and the right IR or the right amplifier or combination of amplifiers, because you can stack different types of amplifiers. And I got tired of it. And there's a lot of plugins like that too. That's why I like STL Tone so much. It's easy. Pick an amp, pick a speaker, done.
Yeah. Well, that for me that's a big thing as well, because it kind of ruins the whole creative process. Because if you think of like some of the best guitarists that have ever recorded music, like they're going to be into the gear, but I guarantee you, like you take like Caius for example, right? When they first started, they were playing on generators in the desert, and Josh Homme was using a bass amp, I believe, for his guitar amp, and some pedals, and tuning down to C standard. He probably wasn't thinking like, well, what if I, add in this, extra effects unit on the side, and it's just not Jimmy Page. No, he probably used some pedals, but it's mainly just an amp, just straight out the amp.
I just had this conversation with one of my students, and he was talking about getting yet another guitar, and I was like, don't do it. Just hold on, man. You have like 6. And he was like, yeah, but this one does blah, 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 XYZ. And I'm like, I know, but check it out, dude. All of these guys that you see, like famous people, like Slash. I mean, like Slash probably uses 3 or 4 Les Pauls that he really, really likes. I was like, Nick Johnston. I know for a fact that Nick Johnston favors 2 or 3 guitars. Steve Vai. Steve Vai has 5 guitars in his studio that he uses all the time. And I was like, if those guys can get it done.
You've got more guitars than Steve Vai. Come on, like it's
I mean, Steve Vai. I mean, he has 280 guitars, but he has 5 that he uses.
He's
all
also
the time.
Steve Vai as well, so that's kind of his whole thing.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? He's kind of should have lots of guitars. If he hasn't got loads of guitars, no one should have guitars.
Joe Satriani, he has 2 or 3 guitars that he really, really likes, and that's what you need. You need 1 or 2 guitars that you really, really love, and they make you want to play, they make you want to learn, they make you want to pick it up every single time you walk past it.
Yeah, I think there's a thing now. This is what I was trying to get at earlier, is that there's all these like accoutrements that people put that are associated with it now, and they actually, in a lot of cases, they just kind of detract from the actual playing part, because you spend so much time fannying around trying to find a guitar to do this and a guitar to do that, and I need the amp sim, or no, do I use my tube amp, or no, I could, it just play your guitar, just play it, and play it through an amp, and remove stuff and see what you can do. I think that's the best thing. All the best art seems to happen when you take things away.
You've talked about this before, about placing
you look at,
limitations.
Yeah, but place limitations on stuff and see what you can do with it. Like, I remember there's a really good interview with, again, go back to Josh Homme, and he was talking about how he developed basically his sound, the Queens of the Stone Age sound, and it was a reductive process. It was taking away things. He was like, even like the power chords he plays, he takes stuff out of the power chord. So he's barring the whole way down usually, but then he's like, what if I take these out? So then he's basically just like, he sticks in he can ring out the octave, and then with the scale as well, like removing notes from the scale, which is what gives it that, well, not so much now, but on like Rated R, the first album, the song, so that kind of like weird, sort of odd, sort of Queens of the Stone Age sound, and that's a reductive thing. I just think you can't, no amount of gear is going to make you a better player or write better riffs. Like if you think you need a certain type of guitar to play a certain type of music, then you're just grossly mistaken, because it's just not the case.
No, and I see that a lot.
It's just ridiculous. I mean, look, if anyone thinks you need, the first, like Blackwater Park, right, is in standard tuning, the Opeth album. That is like heavy as hell. Dillinger Escape Plan, again, ridiculously heavy. It's all in standard.
The first 5 Metallica albums.
Yeah, if you can't play heavy in standard, then just lowering the tuning is not going to make you sound better or heavier. It's just not the way it works, because then it forces you to adapt and go, okay, well, I've got this to do. Then you put constraints on yourself, and then you figure out a way through it, and then sometimes it makes things better, I think. And particularly with art, anyway, any kind of expressive stuff is the more sort of stuff and bravado and weird things that you attach to it to try and make your life. It's like AI. This is a really good thing with like AI. Like AI. Everyone's talking about AI, and AI's doing this and AI's doing that. When it comes to things like creativity, like writing and content and creating videos and stuff like that, AI is basically to creativity what like pornography is to sex. It's not the same thing. You can do similar sort of thing, but it's nowhere near the same.
AI has no ego.
No, and it also it removes you from the creative process. like, you know, just slapping on patches and effects and stuff, it removes you from the actual sound that you're getting, and it glosses over things and, you know, imperfections and stuff. And I think it's just better when it's truer, when it's more, you're just messing around with the sound and you go, okay, well, like Jack White, you know, his guitar sound on the first White Stripes album that made him like a global megastar, it wasn't because he was messing around with tons of effects. It was because he stripped everything back and did what he did with as little equipment, and not particularly good equipment, as possible. Like, the guitars he used were terrible, and he used basically like an octave pedal, big muff, bit of reverb, and some, you know, old school tube amp that he probably had for, you know, 10, 12 years or something.
And it worked. It sounded great.
It was massive. It sounds enormous. It sounds huge, because it does. Like, if you know what you're doing, you can do it with anything. I think that's the kind of moral of the story. And I think people try and get too trapped up, because marketing is very sophisticated nowadays with everything, and it's insidious. It's everywhere. You can't get away from it.
That's the word I use with my student, actually.
Yeah,
I told them the same
sell
thing.
you the dream. They'll sell you that this guitar is used by this guy who you idolize, and he says that he couldn't play his music without this guitar because it's got X, Y, and Z. You know, or this amp, or this pedal, or these effects. It's all just marketing. It's all just nonsense. Like, all the people who, like, the true greats don't care about any of that. Never did, and they never will. It's just, you just get on and do what you do with what you've got. And if you can't afford something, you can't afford it. So what? Just do it anyway. Do it with what you got.
I agree. Hey, if you've got a Squire and a Katana in a way to record, then you've probably got everything you need.
Yeah, you've got better equipment than 99% of musicians that ever walk the earth.
Right. Exactly.
Literally. I mean, think about it. Like, if, like, you're making music, and like when the Beatles were making music, or like the 60s and 70s, it's analog, dangerous. You could literally electrocute yourself to death on stage. You know, PA systems were kind of just about coming out to be a thing. You know, they didn't really have them. They were just, then the Beatles kind of happened, and people were playing in stadiums, and they're like, well, maybe we need to come up with some kind of way to make the music louder. You know,
and the girls screaming in the front row were sometimes louder. Yeah.
Yeah, so we can hear them over the screaming. And that's before you even get into like effects and stuff. I mean, and recording. I mean, Christ, even like when our parents were sort of in their teenage years, if you wanted to record a record, you'd have to go to a recording studio. You'd need these huge banks of desks. You'd need, you know, cables, wires. And now you can literally make a professional sounding album on a laptop with 150 quid USB audio interface and a cable. The barrier to entry, which is basically you have to be good, you have to be talented, you have to be able to write good songs, hasn't changed. That's always been constant. That will always be constant. So no amount of actual process of putting things down and doing it is going to make that any better. The ivory tower is still, you know, as high as it ever was in terms of like the standard and the quality that's required to sort of get in there and, you know, make yourself a bed.
Here's the actual statistic on that. More people right now play guitar, and more people own guitars than ever before. And that's not per capita. Like, that's not just because the population is more. Like, statistically, there are more people with a guitar nowadays learning how to play or actively playing than ever before in history, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's well cool. That means there's going to be a hell of a lot of good music coming soon.
But we still have the same amount, and it's been like that for about 10 years. Guitar has been a very popular instrument, and we still have the same amount of virtuosos coming out, though. It's not like more guitars and more players have produced more virtuosos. I mean, it just hasn't. So people like Tim Henson, people like Nick Johnston, Matthias Asado, people like that are
rare.
Still rare.
But they are rare. That's exceptional human beings are rare anyway. They always are. Whether it's you talking about somebody who's a writer, an athlete, you know, you can take any example. I take Formula One. I mean, I don't know if you'll watch Formula One, but Formula One is, you know, racing car driving. It's kind of the pinnacle. And every there's like an era which is dead, which is, you know, controlled by one driver. There's a Schumacher era, and there's kind of been the Hamilton era, which is Lewis Hamilton, and now it's the Max Verstappen era. And, you know, the other drivers are really good, but they're not as good as that one guy. And obviously the car makes a difference too, but they're all exceptional at what they do, but there's some ones that are just above and beyond. And like Max Verstappen, he was doing it. He started when he was 17 in Formula One, and
Which
he was
is crazy.
He was winning at 19. He was in it for 2 years. His rookie season was a bit sketchy, and then by the time he was 19, he was better than pretty much everybody else on the grid. So you look at writing, like literary stuff. You know, you get you iconic writers who have been
People like Stephen King.
Yeah, I mean, he gets a
Where
lot
everything
of flack,
he
but
writes is, well, yeah, he gets a lot of flack, but yeah, if you look at his golden age, I mean,
it's flawless. Yeah.
and he'll be remembered forever. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see another Jimi Hendrix or another Eddie Van Halen necessarily, but we're kind of getting there.
Yeah, I mean, the music business has changed a lot, I think. So it's a lot more. It's weird because it's become more kind of persona oriented now, which is odd. But the music that is popular and the music that's pushed is kind of, it's not particularly musical, is it? It's just kind of like karaoke with kids.
A lot of it is, I think.
Like the the UK, the vast majority of the chart music is just, it's just garbage. It's just, just forgettable kind of stuff. You hear it in a taxi on the way home or in a kebab shop, and you're just like, come on. People have forgotten about it by, June. Once it's gone, it could be number one, and then by June, no one will remember it. It's like completely forgettable stuff. Yeah, it's completely disposable. But the virtuoso thing, it's a good point, but I think that is just, that's Usain Bolt. I mean, there's loads of runners. Kipchoge, the guy that did the 2-hour marathon. Like, there's tons of people who run at an elite level who can run nearly as fast as him, but they can't do it. They can't do it like him. He's exceptional, and that's the thing. That like humans are exceptional things, but then every now and then there's one that comes along that is truly exceptional, and that's when you're like, wow, there is some kind of like what craziness has happened to, because on paper genetically there's probably not that much difference between, say, Tim Henson and like somebody else's age who's been playing guitar for the same time. I mean, Hendrix literally played guitar for 12 years. He died when he was 27. He started playing it at like 12. That blows my mind.
We only really have a couple of albums to judge him by.
I know, but he only played he started playing at 12 and he died when he was 27. So, Christ, he wasn't even playing for that long.
And he made that kind of an impact.
Yeah, Lars Ulrich has been playing drums for longer than Jimi Hendrix was alive. And Lars Ulrich is still not very good on drums. So it's like, you're talking about exceptional human beings, and it's obviously something that's innate inside them. It's like it's a natural born talent that is expressed somehow, I don't know, genetically or whatever. But it's just there. It's like, there's that guy, what's his name? Rupert, I think it's Rupert Sheldrake. He wrote a book. It's called like about basically how science can't explain how people know how to do things. Like a spider knows how to make a spider's web. Human embryo knows how to grow exactly into a human embryo, and DNA obviously plays a certain role in it, but there's way more to it than that. But the amount of information required is, it's not contained. It's not, everything's not contained in the DNA coding. So he kind of wrote this book, and he calls it like, what's it called, like morphic fields or something? He says it's like some kind of like algorithmic field that exists that kind of, that's what helps us express as creatures existing in this reality. It's a very interesting book, and he's a bit out there, but he is he's a very smart guy. But he talks about that, like how certain people have these natural, almost, terrifyingly good abilities, where other people who've had similar teaching and instruction don't. So yeah, it's like a mystery, but it's amazing.
You'll have to send that to me, because that's actually next week's podcast.
What, Rupert
next week we're going to talk about, is guitar playing something that comes from constant practice, or do you have to have natural born talent? is natural born talent a real thing?
Yes.
Is what we're going to discuss next week.
I think it is. Well, then it's the debate, though, isn't it? Is it will? Is it active will? Is it somebody who just makes a decision and goes, I am going to be an exceptional guitarist at a very young age, and then it becomes the driving force behind everything that they do. So everything they do is towards that goal of being exceptional at their chosen thing. Or is it like people? Because some people just go, I'd like to be good on guitar, and they'll play for 10 minutes a day, once a week or something. That's not going to get you there. It's it's not the 10,000 hour rule. It's the 100,000 hour rule with tons and tons and tons of just constant obsession, I think, is what creates exceptional players.
I'll give you a teaser as to what brought this up, and then we'll wrap up. Basically, my girlfriend and I were talking, and she asked me how long did it take before I considered myself good. And I thought about it, and I can honestly say I don't remember a time where I struggled with guitar, which is a pretty ballsy thing to say. I understand, but
you're pretty old
back,
now, though, so maybe your memory's fading a bit.
Maybe my memory's bad, but no. I mean, I think I literally manifested it. I saw it for years. I mimicked it in front of the mirror when I was a kid with a broom, with a tennis racket, whatever. When I finally got one, I couldn't put it down. And I don't think I ever got frustrated. I never struggled. I just did it. And I still do it today, but I can't imagine my life without it.
Yeah, because you loved it. And it was an obsession. And that's kind of what I was saying. It's like, I think that's the difference. It's, you have to be single-minded. It's the execution of your will, an intrinsic level of your being. If you put your heart, everyone says, put your heart through it, you'll get there.
But it's true.
It's true. But most people don't really get the level of focus and obsession that has to go into it, I think. But then if you love something, then obsessing and focusing on something isn't a problem. It's because you're doing something you love. So it's fun. It's great. That's the thing that makes it, I think. It has to be something that you care about to the level that you love it above all everything else, or it's as important to you as other things that are deeply important in your life, like your family, friends, going out, whatever. But some people just kind of like to bounce along and be like, I like going out, I like playing guitar, I like having a drink, watching TV and stuff. Whereas the person who's going to be a successful writer is somebody who, they get back from work and they're working on the novel. On the break, they're sat down with a notebook outside, writing down ideas, going over stuff, reflecting on stuff. Like, you listen to Quentin Tarantino is a really good example of this. Like, if you listen to any interviews with him, he says he's been obsessed with film for as long as he can remember. He worked in a video store. He was working on screenplays as soon as he could write. He took a job, didn't go to college. I don't think he went to college. I think he took a job and he worked in a video store in Hollywood. And he was that's where he wrote Reservoir Dogs. But his whole life was just, that was it. I'm going to make films. And he didn't even care if no one would let him. He just made them anyway. But he said he was obsessed with films, like to the point that it wasn't even a question. It was like, no, this is what I'm doing. This is it. So that's it. And then life just has a habit of just falling in line when you have that kind of one-minded will.
I can honestly say that, I was pretty much the same way, actually. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You will notice at the bottom of the podcast now, instead of saying visit electricjam.com, we have a brand new link, and that link is to our email list that we've been harping about for the past 6 podcasts. And it's right down there. All you got to do is click it, sign up. And if you want to send us an email, we respond to everything. Got anything to say about that, Richard? You usually put it more succinctly than me.
No, you did it right. But the email is, just a way of keeping in touch with us. And we send out, there's one email a week. That's it. It's got a video in it where Chris will show you how to do something cool. Covers us some news, and then anything that we've been testing, or anything that we think you should know about, it's kind of included in there. It's really straightforward, really easy. And it's also a good place if you want something covered on the podcast, you can drop us a line there. And that's it really. Other than that, the site is obviously electricjam.com. and we're uploading stuff every day. And we're doing a lot more news now. So if you're interested in keeping abreast of the news, like, you know, new guitars, movement shakers in the market, you know, new
new bands.
Pugs? I can't believe I said pugs. I meant to say pedals, and I said pugs instead.
New dogs.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot more news now. The news output's kind of going up a lot. So if you're interested in reading like daily news, then, you know, just pop over in the morning or in the afternoon, wherever you are, and there should be some new stuff there for you to read.
Yeah, we have some big stuff coming up, especially with videos. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to definitely build a song with nothing but free plugins and show you how easy that can be. A bunch of really good video content coming. I'm editing it, trying to get it down as we speak, so keep an eye on our YouTube too. We'll have a link for that down below. Otherwise, thanks for listening.
See you next week.
I can't believe that we said see you next week at the same time.